Welcome to Voices from Forgotten Souls, the home of true history stories that were buried in silence for many years. Before we begin, please tell us where you are watching from, the city and the country, because we appreciate knowing how far our stories travel. If you have not subscribed yet, kindly do so and like this video because it helps our community grow. Please consider supporting us by joining our membership platform, because your support helps our team continue the deep and difficult research we do to bring you stories like this. Our PayPal and MyMia Coffee account has been posted at our channel description, just in case you want to gift us. We truly appreciate your love and support, and we do not take it for granted. Now, let us get into our story for today. Adele was born on the island of Guadeloupe when the world was still controlled by powerful plantation owners and cruel overseers. Her birth was not celebrated with joy or song because she was born into chains. People said she came into the world on a night when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds and the forest was quiet, as if the wind itself was afraid. From her earliest days, she drew attention because of her beauty. Her eyes were wide and deep. Her skin was a rich shade that glowed under sunlight, and her hair fell in thick curls that framed her face. Even as a little girl, the people around her whispered that she was too beautiful for her own safety. And they were right. Her mother worked inside one of the grand plantation houses. The owner of that house was a man known for his cruelty, a man who did not need a reason to punish or insult the people he controlled. His name was Monsieur de la Fosse, and he enjoyed using his power the way some men enjoy wine. Adele saw all this with her young eyes. She saw how the people feared him. She saw how the overseers walked around with rope and cane. She saw how quickly a smile on the plantations could turn into a cry for help. She saw at a very early age that beauty did not protect anyone. When she was 10 years old, her mother was accused of stealing a silver spoon. No one believed she did it, not even the overseer who made the accusation. But in those dark days, an accusation was all that was needed. Adele watched her mother, dragged outside. She watched her mother, tied to a tree. She watched her mother cry out her name. The punishment was severe, and her mother did not survive past that night. That was the moment Adele changed. Her heart burned with a quiet fire that no one could see, but it grew stronger every day. Adele was moved around different plantation houses as she grew older. Every place she went, she attracted attention. People stared at her because she grew into a woman whose beauty could silence a room. Her face was soft yet sharp. Her voice was calm yet enticing, and her movements were graceful even when she carried heavy loads. Men whispered about her. Some feared her because her beauty seemed unreal. Some wanted her because they believed she would be easy to conquer. But no one knew that behind her gentle smile was a mind sharper than any blade. When she became a young woman, word of her beauty reached a master known as Monsieur Belacroix. He was a rich Frenchman who owned several pieces of land across the island. He was a man who believed everything beautiful was created for his pleasure. When he heard about Adele, he demanded that she be brought to his estate. The man who delivered her warned him that she was calm but strong-willed. Belacroix only laughed because men like him did not believe enslaved people had a will. When Adele arrived, Belacroix stared at her with a hunger that made her skin crawl. But she kept her face soft and calm because she had learned many years ago that people reveal themselves when they believe you are harmless. Belacroix tried to impress her with his wealth. He showed her his wine collection. He showed her the garden behind his large house. He even gave her jewelry that once belonged to his late wife. Adele said very little, but she watched him with careful eyes. She saw the way he treated the people who served him. She saw how he pushed an old man to the floor simply because the old man walked too slowly. She saw how Belacroix spoke with pride about how many people he controlled, and she decided that this man would be her first target. She did not know how she would strike, but she knew she would. She worked in Belacroix's house with perfect obedience. She moved like a soft breeze. She cooked. She cleaned. She laughed when he made jokes. She looked at him with eyes that made him feel powerful. And slowly, Belacroix began to trust her. He trusted her more than he trusted anyone else, because he believed her beauty meant she had no other value except to please him. But Adele's beauty hid something far more deadly. It hid patience. It hid intelligence. And most importantly, it hid an anger that had been growing for many years. Belacroix fell in love with her in his own selfish way. To him, love was possession. So when he looked at Adele, he saw something he believed he owned completely. He began taking her into his private room. He believed she enjoyed his attention because she smiled sometimes. He did not know that every smile was a disguise. He did not know that every touch she allowed was part of a plan. He did not know that the beauty he wanted to control would one day become the reason for his death. One evening, Belacroix invited Adele into his room after drinking too much wine. His steps were heavy. His words came out slow and scattered. He told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He told her she should be grateful for his attention. He told her he could give her anything she wanted. Adele listened quietly, her eyes soft, her voice gentle. She walked behind him. She spoke in a soft whisper. She asked if he wanted more wine. Belacroix nodded slowly. He turned away from her. He did not see the way her expression changed. He did not see the coldness in her eyes. He did not see the way she reached for the small pillow on his bed. He did not know that her heart was beating with a calm, steady rhythm. Adele moved silently. She came behind him. She pressed the pillow against his face. At first, he thought she was being playful. He laughed. He tried to speak. He tried to pull the pillow away, but Adele pressed harder. She did not speak. She did not blink. She did not tremble. Belacroix struggled, but he was drunk and weak. Soon his arms stopped moving. His legs stopped shaking. His breathing stopped, and Adele stood over him, calm as ever. She whispered to herself that her mother's spirit could now rest. She cleaned the room carefully. She placed the pillow exactly where it belonged. She left the room quietly. When Belacroix was found the next morning, everyone believed he died from too much wine because there were empty bottles all around him. No one suspected Adele because she had spent the night in the kitchen where several people had seen her. Her plan was perfect. Her beauty had blinded him. Her mind had destroyed him. But that was only the beginning. Adele now understood the power she held. She had learned that people saw beauty and forgot danger. She had learned that people trusted what pleased their eyes. And she had learned that revenge could be planned with silence and executed with precision. She also knew there were more cruel men on the island. She knew there were more masters who believed they owned people like her. She knew that she could use her beauty the way others used a blade, and she intended to continue. This was the first death. the beginning of her legend. But it was only the first step in a path of vengeance that would shake Guadeloupe in the early years of the 1810s. A path that would turn a beautiful enslaved woman into one of the most silent killers the island had ever known. Adele woke up the morning after Belacroix died, with calm eyes and a steady breath, because she had learned something powerful about the world around her. She understood that fear could become strength when guided by intelligence. She understood that anger could become a weapon when shaped by patience. She walked around the estate with the same gentle smile she always carried, and no one suspected that she had taken the life of the most powerful man in that household. People whispered that the master had been drinking too much for many months, and that his heart must have finally given up. The doctor who examined him said the same thing, because he saw nothing unusual. Adele listened quietly, and she felt something growing inside her. Not pride, but a calm certainty that her life had changed forever. She was no longer the frightened girl who watched her mother die. She had become someone who could choose her own path, even in a world that tried to deny her the right to choose anything. After Belacroix's funeral, the estate changed hands, and Adele was sold to another plantation, far away from the one where her mother had lived. The new owner was a man named Monsieur Renaud. He was younger and leaner, and he carried himself like someone who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. He had a quiet cruelty, the kind that did not shout, the kind that smiled while inflicting pain, and the kind that believed control was a form of art. When he saw Adele for the first time, he stared at her in a way that sent chills across her skin. She bowed her head, the way she had learned to do when men like him examined her. She kept her expression calm, but inside she felt the heat of old memories rise like smoke. She did not want to fall under the control of another monster, but she knew something important. She had learned that her beauty could become a trap, a silent trap, a deadly trap. Renaud watched her closely during her first weeks on the estate. He watched the way she walked, the way she served food, the way she carried water, and the way men reacted to her. He questioned the overseers about her past. They told him she had served Belacroix, and that she had been quiet and obedient. Renaud smiled, because quiet obedience was exactly what he wanted in a woman. He believed she would adore him if he gave her fine dresses, or sweet fruits, or a better sleeping place. He believed he could bend her mind the way he had bent so many others, and Adele let him believe it. She spoke softly when he called her. She looked away shyly when he complimented her. She did not resist when he touched her arm. She did not pull back when he stood too close. She knew that drawing him in was the first step in her revenge. Renaud was different from Belacroix in many ways. Belacroix had been loud and heavy, a man who enjoyed forcing his presence into every space. Renaud was quiet, thoughtful, and calculating. He preferred secrets over noise. He preferred strategy over strength. And he preferred to break people slowly, rather than all at once. Adele watched him carefully. She studied the way he reacted to kindness. She studied the way he reacted to fear. She noticed that he trusted people who showed admiration for him. She noticed that he was weakest when he believed someone depended on him. She knew these patterns would be important, because Renaud was her second target. She had no desire to kill him quickly, because she wanted to understand him first. She wanted to know the kind of cruelty he carried inside. She wanted to know how deeply she could manipulate him, so she took her time, She cooked food the way he liked it. She warmed water for his baths. She massaged his shoulders when he returned from inspecting the fields. And she listened to his stories, even when each word made her want to walk away. Renaud believed she was falling in love with him. He believed she admired his intelligence. He believed she was grateful for his attention. And with each passing day, he allowed her deeper into his private space, where no one else was allowed to go. Inside this private room, she learned his routines. He drank a cup of warm rum before he slept every night. He locked the door behind him before lying down. He kept a small dagger beside his bed. He enjoyed reading letters from his business partners because he believed they respected him. She also learned that he trusted her enough to let her prepare his nightly drink. This discovery made her heart beat faster because she knew she could end his life at any moment. But she did not rush. She wanted the perfect moment. She wanted a moment when his guard was so low that suspicion would be impossible. One evening, Renaud returned home angry. He shouted at the overseers. He shouted at the field workers. He shouted at anyone who walked too close to him. Adele followed him into the house, and he pushed a chair violently, sending it sliding across the floor. He then turned to her, with eyes full of frustration. He told her he was tired of people disappointing him. He told her she was the only one who made him feel calm. He reached for her hand and pulled her close. She felt his breath against her neck, and she forced herself not to step away. She whispered that she was there for him. She whispered that she cared for him. Her voice trembled in a way that pleased him. He believed she was afraid of losing him. He believed he had control over her. His belief brought her exactly where she needed him to be. That night, when she prepared his warm rum, she took a long time stirring the cup. Renaud watched her with a lazy smile. He was tired, and his anger had left him vulnerable. His shoulders dropped. His eyes softened. She gave him the cup, and he drank it slowly. He tasted nothing unusual. He smiled. He thanked her. And then he lay down on his bed. Adele stood beside him with her hands by her sides. She watched as his eyes started to close. She watched as his breathing slowed. She watched as his body relaxed deeper into the mattress. The poison she used was made from a mixture of crushed seeds and boiled leaves. It was not a poison that killed suddenly. It worked slowly. It made the heart heavy. It made the breath shallow. It made the muscles weak. She had learned about this poison many years ago from an older woman who had once been a healer before slavery took everything from her. The old woman told her that the poison was not meant for animals. It was meant for monsters. Adele remembered every instruction clearly. Renaud tried to speak, but his words broke into pieces. He tried to lift his arm, but it fell back down. He looked at Adele with confusion. His eyes asked a question. He could not speak. She leaned down until her face was close to his. She whispered that not every beautiful woman is weak. She whispered that her mother's spirit was guiding her hands. She whispered that men like him had created their own fate. He tried to respond, but the poison had taken control. His movements became smaller and smaller until they stopped completely. His eyes remained open but dull. His breath vanished softly. And Adele stepped back with the same calm expression she always carried. She cleaned the cup carefully. She wiped the table. She straightened the sheets around him. She walked out of the room without making a sound. When he was found the next morning, the doctor said his heart must have collapsed from stress. He said the long hours and heavy responsibilities had caught up with him. No one questioned Adele, because she had been serving food in the kitchen the entire evening, with many witnesses around her. Renaud's death strengthened her confidence. She realized something important about the world she lived in. People believed beautiful things could not be dangerous. People believed gentle smiles meant harmless intentions. People believed enslaved women existed only to obey. She used these foolish beliefs as her shield, and she began to understand the full power of silence. Silence could hide anger. Silence could hide plans. Silence could hide revenge. After Renaud's death, she was sold again because the estate had no stable leadership. She traveled across the island on a small boat. She stared at the horizon and told herself that she would continue her mission. She would continue until the memories of the people she lost were honored. She would continue until she felt the weight inside her chest become lighter. She would continue until the island that stole so much from her felt her silent wrath. She arrived at a new plantation, owned by a man named Monsieur Guérin. He was older and slower, but his cruelty was well known. People said he enjoyed punishing workers, just to hear them beg. They said he smiled when he saw fear in the eyes of others. They said he believed God had given him the right to dominate anyone who was not like him. Adele listened to these stories quietly. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest. She knew she was about to begin again. She knew she would need patience. She knew she would need to study him. She knew she would need to become the person he wanted to see. A gentle woman, a soft woman, a harmless woman, a perfect mask that hid a dangerous truth. This was the beginning of her third mission, a mission that would test her in new ways, a mission that would push her deeper into the shadows of her own mind, a mission that would bring her closer to the legend she would one day become. She was no longer only a beautiful woman. She was becoming a ghost that moved through the houses of cruel men, a ghost that smiled, a ghost that charmed, a ghost that killed without leaving a trace. Adele arrived at Monsieur Guérin's estate with the same calm expression she always carried, because she knew that the world rewarded those who hid their intentions well. Guérin was a thick man, with a round stomach, and a face that looked permanently irritated. His eyes were small and narrow, as if he spent his entire life squinting at people, searching for a reason to punish them. When Adele was brought before him, he stared at her with a look that mixed curiosity and hunger. She kept her gaze low, because humility made men like him feel powerful. He lifted her chin with his hand and examined her face. He said she looked like a woman who would obey without question. Inside her mind, she repeated the same words she had whispered during the death of her first two masters. A soft woman can be deadly if the world underestimates her. Guérin walked away without another word. Adele understood immediately that he was the type who believed silence was a form of domination. She followed the overseer, who showed her to the servant quarters. While walking, she looked around the estate and studied everything she saw. The buildings were arranged in a circle, with the large house at the center like a throne. The fields stretched far and wide, with sugarcane waving gently in the warm breeze. Workers bent their backs over the crops, while overseers shouted instructions. Nothing was different from the countless plantations she had seen before. Yet she knew each place carried its own darkness. She listened to the whispers of the workers. They told her that Guérin had once beaten a young man to death for dropping a water jug. They told her that Guérin refused to allow sick workers to rest. They told her that he treated punishments like entertainment. Each story fed the flame inside her until it grew warm and steady. She began working inside the house, just as she had in the previous estates. She served food. She cleaned the floors. She washed clothes. She learned the rhythm of life in the household. Garen's routines became familiar to her within a few weeks. He woke up early every morning. He drank strong coffee with sugar. He walked through the fields while the workers trembled at the sight of him. He returned home to rest in the afternoon. He ate large meals in the evening. He drank heavy liquor at night. And he always demanded that a woman be present in his room before he slept. Most women feared this task because Garen was rough and selfish. He believed that touching someone was the same as controlling them. He believed that causing discomfort was a sign of power. When he asked for Adele one evening, she felt a cold wave move through her body. But she walked into his room with her usual calm expression. She understood that vengeance required sacrifice. She understood that freedom came with a cost. She understood that she did not carry her mission alone. She carried the memories of every person who had suffered under the hands of men like him. Garen smelled of sweat and strong liquor. He pulled her roughly to his side and spoke slowly, as if tasting his own words. He told her she would serve only him from that night onward. He told her she should be grateful for such an honor. She nodded softly, because obedience was the mask she needed. He ran his fingers across her arm, and she remained still. She did not tremble. She did not flinch. Inside her heart there was a storm, but on her face there was only softness. When he finally slept, she stood beside his bed and watched him closely. She memorized the way his chest rose and fell. She memorized the position of his hands at his sides. She memorized every detail of the room, but she did not act yet because she knew the timing had to be perfect. She needed to secure trust. Trust was the foundation of every silent strike. For several weeks, she continued serving him. She responded gently when he called her. She listened when he complained about the plantation workers. She laughed at his jokes, even though they twisted her stomach. She pretended to care when he spoke about the profits he made from sugar cane. Garen grew comfortable around her. He grew confident that she was loyal. He grew certain that she admired him, and that was exactly what she wanted. During this time, the other workers began whispering about her. Some wondered why Garen treated her better than the others. Some believed she had cast a charm over him. Others suspected she was planning something, but they were too afraid to ask. Adele kept her intentions hidden from everyone, because secrets became dangerous when too many ears were near them. Her only companion was her own mind, and her mind was sharp, steady, and unforgiving. One evening, Garen returned from the fields in a foul mood. A young worker had spilled sugarcane juice on his shoe, and he had punished the boy with a whip. His anger still burned inside him as he entered the house. He shouted at the servants. He threw a plate on the floor. He pushed a chair aside. When Adele walked toward him, he grabbed her wrist too tightly and demanded that she bring him a drink. She nodded without reacting. She walked to the kitchen slowly and prepared his drink just the way he liked it. She added nothing unusual to it because she needed him to trust the taste. When she returned, she handed him the cup and he drank it in one gulp. His breathing softened. His shoulders relaxed. He sat on the edge of his bed and sighed heavily. He spoke to her in a tired voice. He said he was surrounded by fools. He said he deserved more respect. He said the workers should fear him more. Adele listened quietly, and then he lay down without warning. She watched him with expressionless eyes. This was not the night she planned to strike, but it was the night when she understood the perfect method she would use. Garin trusted his liquor so much that he drank it every night. He never questioned it. He never suspected anyone who served it. She realized she could use this routine to her advantage, but unlike Renaud, she did not want a quick death. She wanted one that mirrored the slow cruelty he had shown the people on his estate, a death that would confuse the doctor, a death that would look like sickness, a death that would leave no mark for anyone to trace. For days, she prepared the ingredients silently. She collected leaves from the forest during early mornings when no one paid attention to her. She dried them under the sun. She crushed them into soft powder. She hid the powder under a loose floorboard in the servant quarters. Each step she took was careful. Each decision she made was deliberate. She had learned that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes led to suspicion. Garin continued calling her every night, and she continued responding with calm obedience. She made him feel safe. She made him feel adored. She made him feel like she was the only person he could trust. And then, one warm night, she knew the moment had come. She prepared his drink with steady hands. She added a small portion of the powder into the liquid. The drink smelled normal. The drink tasted normal, but it carried death in silence. She walked into his room and gave it to him. He drank it quickly. Because he trusted her completely. He did not know that every swallow brought him closer to the end of his cruelty. She stood beside him as he lay down. She watched his eyes become heavy. She watched his breathing change. She watched the poison begin to take hold. It did not kill him immediately. It worked slowly, the same way he had destroyed the spirits of many workers. It made his chest tighten. It made his breath shallow. It made his muscles weak. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He tried to lift his hand, but it fell back down. He looked at her with confusion, because he could not understand why he felt weaker with every breath. She leaned closer. She whispered softly that the world was watching him. She whispered that the spirits of those he hurt were rising against him. She whispered that beauty can be a blessing, but it can also be a silent weapon. He tried to grab her arm, but his fingers slipped away. His body trembled for a few seconds, and then became still. His eyes remained open in shock. Adele watched until his chest stopped moving entirely. She then closed his eyes with her hand. She cleaned the cup. She placed it neatly on the table. She made the bed look untouched. She walked out with the same calm expression she had entered with. The next morning, the workers found him pale and barely breathing. He died before the doctor arrived. The doctor said it must have been a sudden illness, brought on by stress and heavy drinking. Everyone accepted this explanation, because Garin had always been a man who lived without caution. No one suspected Adele, because she had spent the previous night sewing clothes with two women who saw her the entire time. This was a third kill. A clean kill. A silent kill. A kill that left no trace. Her legend was growing, even though no one knew her name. She remained a shadow that moved through the lives of cruel men and left them breathless. In her heart she felt no joy, but she felt something else. A steady strength, a growing purpose, a deep understanding that her mission was far from over. She knew she would be sold again. She knew she would meet new monsters. She knew she would continue spreading justice in the only way the world allowed her. She was becoming a force the island could not see, but would eventually fear. She was becoming a quiet storm, a beautiful storm, a storm made of patience, intelligence, and an unbreakable desire for revenge. After Garen's death, the estate fell into chaos because the overseers did not know who would take control, and the workers feared what new cruelty might replace the old. Adele kept her calm expression through every moment of confusion because she knew that chaos often created opportunities. Within a few weeks, the plantation was visited by a merchant named Monsieur Duval, who inspected the land and announced that he had purchased the entire property. Duval saw Adele among the servants, and his eyes widened slightly as he examined her face and her posture. She lowered her gaze as she always did, because behaving with humility allowed men like him to project their fantasies onto her. Duval approached her and asked her name in a soft voice that seemed rehearsed, as if he wanted to appear gentle, even though his eyes told a different story. When she answered, he nodded slowly and told the overseer that she would be transferred to his personal estate. The overseer did not question him because he knew the new master had absolute authority. Adele felt a familiar heaviness in her chest as she prepared to leave yet another plantation, but she also felt the steady flame of purpose within her. She had taken the lives of 3 powerful men, and she knew there were more on the island who treated enslaved people with cruelty. She did not consider herself a hero. She considered herself a necessary consequence of the pain the world had created. Duval's estate was built on a hill that overlooked the coastline, and the house itself was tall and wide, with white walls and large windows. The workers said Duval was charming in public, but cruel in private. They said he smiled like a gentleman, but punished like a demon. They said he called himself a man of culture, yet he treated human lives like tools. When Adele arrived, Duval greeted her with an elegant posture. He spoke softly to her, as if trying to impress her with his manners, but she could feel the coldness in his presence. He ordered the servants to give her better clothing and a separate sleeping mat inside the house. This treatment made her suspicious, because kindness from a master was rarely kindness at all. Soon she understood the truth. Duval loved women the way collectors loved rare objects. He admired beauty, not out of affection, but out of desire to possess and control. He enjoyed shaping the minds of the women he kept close, and he believed that a woman who depended on him was a woman he owned entirely. Adele saw through him almost immediately. She responded to his politeness with careful gentleness. She thanked him for every gesture. She spoke softly whenever he addressed her. She allowed him to believe he was special to her, but inside her heart, she held her purpose tightly, because she knew he was another man who drained life from those around him. She watched him the same way a hawk watches a distant movement. She studied his routines. She learned that he spent every morning reading letters at the dining table. She learned that he preferred the company of musicians and wealthy friends who visited him once or twice every week. She learned that he enjoyed showing off his possessions, including the people under his control. She learned that he drank sweet wine at night while listening to a small music box he kept by his bed. She also learned that he had a habit of keeping all his windows closed because he disliked fresh air. Her mind began to build a plan, slowly and silently. Unlike the other men she had killed, Duval was more cautious with his food and drinks, so poisoning him would be difficult. He also kept guards near the house, so sneaking into his room at night without being noticed would be risky. But she noticed something else. He always invited her into his room to stand beside him while he drank his sweet wine and listened to the music box. He did not touch her the way Garin did. Duval was more refined in his approach. He spoke about poetry. He complimented her appearance. He asked her if she understood the meaning of music. He believed he was charming her with sophistication. Adele responded with soft smiles and gentle nods. She listened as he spoke about himself, because men like him loved their own voices. She understood that if she allowed him to feel admired, he would trust her deeply. Trust was the doorway she needed. Weeks passed slowly, and she gained more access to Duval's private life. He began asking her to help arrange his letters. He asked her to serve his wine. He asked her to sit near him while he read. Every small request was a step closer to his downfall. Adele waited patiently for the perfect moment. One evening, Duval invited a group of wealthy friends to his estate for a gathering. The men wore elegant coats and heavy rings. They spoke loudly about business, politics, and the cost of sugar. They laughed while discussing the punishments they had given to workers who displeased them. As Adele moved through the room, serving wine, she listened to every word. She felt the familiar sadness inside her, but she did not allow it to distract her. During the gathering, one of the men spilled his drink and demanded that someone clean it immediately. When Adele knelt down to wipe the floor, she heard them discussing Duval's weakness. They said he had an unusual fear of being alone in the dark. They said he slept with a candle beside his bed every night. They said he panicked if the flame went out. Adele lifted her eyes slightly. She realized that she had just learned something important. She finished cleaning the floor and walked away with a calm expression. The next morning, Duval asked her to join him for a walk around the estate. He spoke about his plans to expand his land. He spoke about his desire to increase production. He spoke about his fear that the workers would revolt someday. He told her that she was different from the others because she was quiet and obedient. She repeated the same soft words she had spoken to the others before him. She told him she was grateful. She told him she wanted to serve him well. She told him she admired his strength, and he believed her. He believed every word. That night, she watched him drink his wine. The candle on his bedside table flickered softly. He sighed, as if the weight of the world sat on his shoulders. She waited until he lay down fully. His eyes closed slowly. His breathing deepened. She stood beside the table and looked at the candle. This small flame was the only thing keeping him calm in the darkness. She understood that fear could be a lethal weapon when directed correctly. She blew out the candle and whispered good night in a soft voice. The room fell into total darkness. Duval's breath caught in his throat. His eyes snapped open, and he sat up quickly. He began asking what happened, but his voice trembled. He asked her to relight the candle. She stood silently. He asked again, louder this time, but she did not move. He began to panic. He stumbled out of bed. He tripped over a small rug. His foot struck the edge of the table. He fell forward and hit his head on the wooden frame of the bed. The sound was heavy and sharp. He attempted to stand, but he tripped again and his head struck the floor. His voice cracked into a frightened cry. He begged her to bring light. He begged her not to leave him in the darkness. But she did not speak. She did not move. She watched the darkness consume him. He crawled toward her voice. She stepped quietly backward. He struggled to breathe because fear had taken control of him. He hit his head again in the darkness. His breath became uneven. His voice faded into small gasps, and then he fell still. When the morning came, the guards found him lying on the floor, with his candle knocked over. They believed he had fallen in the night and injured himself. They believed it was an accident, caused by his own clumsiness, because he always avoided darkness. No one suspected Adele, because she had returned to her sleeping mat long before sunrise, and several servants saw her there. This was her fourth kill. A kill crafted not by poison or suffocation, but by fear itself. A kill that showed her how powerful the mind could be when used with patience and precision. She was becoming something more than a woman seeking revenge. She was becoming a silent storm that swept through the island, leaving death behind without ever showing its face. She knew she would be moved again, and she welcomed it. The world kept placing her in the path of cruel men, and she accepted her role as the shadow that ended their cruelty. She understood now that her journey was far from over. Her story was still unfolding like a long, dark river with no end in sight. She had become death wrapped in beauty. She had become justice wrapped in silence. She had become fear wrapped in a gentle smile. After the death of Monsieur Duval, whispers began to travel across different plantations, although no one truly knew the cause behind the string of sudden deaths among powerful men. Some people blamed stress, some blamed sickness, some blamed the island's changing climate. A few spoke quietly of curses and spirits, but no one ever looked in the direction of the calm, beautiful woman who moved like a gentle breeze. No one suspected that she carried a storm inside her. The world saw Adele as soft, obedient, and harmless, and that blindness kept her safe. When Duval's estate was sold, she was taken to a port on the western side of the island. She was placed on a small boat that carried supplies across different plantations. The man who operated the boat spoke little to her. He occasionally looked at her reflection in the water and shook his head, as if wondering why someone so beautiful lived a life so harsh. She sat quietly and watched the water ripple around them. The sea breeze touched her face, and for a moment she felt peace. But peace was not a place she could stay for long. The boat arrived at a new plantation, owned by a man named Master Renard. Unlike the others she had encountered, Renard was not known for beating workers himself. Instead, he enjoyed watching others do it. He hired the cruelest overseers because he believed fear produced obedience. He also believed that enslaved women existed for entertainment. Renard was tall, with thin lips and a long, narrow face. His eyes were sharp and cold, like a bird of prey. When he saw Adele being escorted into the yard, his expression shifted instantly. His eyes dragged across her face, her posture and her movements. She kept her gaze low, because she knew the look of a predator when she saw one. Renard approached her slowly. He asked for her name. He asked where she came from. He asked who had trained her. She answered each question softly, because silence sometimes raised suspicion, but gentleness made men comfortable. Renard placed his hand under her chin and forced her to look at him. He said her eyes were the kind he liked. He said she would serve him directly. The workers nearby exchanged glances filled with sadness and worry. They knew what it meant when Renard chose someone. And Adele understood the fear in their eyes because she had seen that fear many times before. She was taken into the house immediately. She learned her duties quickly. She was to prepare Renard's clothes. She was to serve his meals. She was to be available whenever he called. Some women avoided looking at her because they thought she would become Renard's favorite. Others pitied her because they knew favorites suffered in different ways. Adele did not argue. She did not resist. She blended once again into the space around her. But inside her mind, she was already studying Renard. She studied the way he walked. She studied the way he looked at other women. She studied the way he smiled only when someone else was in pain. She studied the way he enjoyed causing suffering, not out of anger, but out of pleasure. Renard was the kind of man who believed other people existed only to serve the needs of his desires. He believed his own comfort was more valuable than the life of anyone around him. This made him dangerous. But Adele had learned something powerful in her journey. The more dangerous a man believed he was, the easier it was to blind him with confidence. Within a few days, Renard began calling her into his room every night. He spoke to her with soft words that hit a sharp edge. He told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever owned. He told her she should be grateful for his affection. He told her she was lucky to be chosen. She kept her smile soft and her tone gentle, because she needed him to trust her deeply. His trust was the rope she would use to tie his downfall. Renard had a strange habit that became clear after the first few nights. Before sleeping, he always sat on a wooden stool and soaked his feet in warm water mixed with herbs. He believed it helped him sleep. He believed the warm mixture relaxed his body. He believed it cleansed him of stress. And only one person was allowed to prepare this mixture: Adele. She paid attention to every detail. She watched how he reacted to the temperature of the water. She watched how long he soaked his feet. She watched how he closed his eyes when the warmth spread through his legs. She knew this routine would be important. She began speaking to the older servants during the day. She asked simple questions about Renard. Most people were too afraid to say much, but an elderly woman named Maurice whispered something useful when no one else was listening. Maris said Renard suffered from weak circulation. She said the doctor once told him that cold temperatures could stop his heart. She said Renard became terrified whenever he felt a sudden chill. Adele nodded gently. She thanked the woman quietly, and her mind began constructing a plan that required patience, timing, and a deeper understanding of fear. Renard carried a secret fear of cold, a fear strong enough to paralyze him, a fear he never admitted openly. Adele understood that fear could become a weapon stronger than any knife, but she did not rush. She had learned that rushing created mistakes. One evening, Renard returned from visiting a neighboring plantation. He had been drinking heavily. He spoke louder than usual. He dragged her into his room and demanded that she prepare his foot bath. She filled the bowl with warm water and added herbs just as he liked. He sat down and placed his feet inside it. He sighed with pleasure. He began talking about the punishments he had seen earlier that day. He laughed as he described the suffering of others. Each word made her anger grow hotter, but she kept her face soft. When he finished the bath, she carried the bowl outside carefully. She poured the water away. She cleaned the bowl slowly. When she returned inside, she noticed something she had not seen before. Renard kept a small wooden box near his bed. She observed it from a distance for a moment. During the next few days, she learned what the box contained. It held his most cherished items, including a dark blue cloth he used whenever he felt chills. He believed the cloth protected him from cold air. The cloth was soft and smelled of expensive oils. He guarded it carefully. Adele realized that the cloth was the key to his weakness. If she could remove it at the right moment, fear would take control of him. But there was more to consider. She needed the room to be cold enough to trigger his fear. She needed him to be half asleep. She needed him to be vulnerable. The opportunity arrived unexpectedly. One night, a strong wind swept across the island. The temperature dropped, and the breeze carried a chill that made even the workers shiver. Renard complained loudly about the cold air slipping through the windows. He demanded that Adele close every window tightly. She did, but she left a tiny crack in one window where the wind could slip through without being noticed. When Renard entered his room to sleep, the air already felt colder than usual. He shivered slightly. He demanded his blue cloth. She handed it to him. He wrapped himself tightly in it and closed his eyes. He was restless. He turned on the bed several times. He groaned as the wind slipped across his skin. Adele stood silently near the bed. She waited patiently. When his breathing slowed and he began drifting into shallow sleep, she moved quietly. She pulled the blue cloth away from his body in one smooth motion. Renard felt the sudden cold, and his eyes snapped open. He reached for the cloth, but she stepped back with it. He demanded she return it. His voice trembled. The wind seeped through the cracks. He clutched his chest. He tried to stand, but his legs shook. He took one step toward her, but the cold air made him gasp. He began to panic. He shouted for help. No one heard him because the workers slept far away. He reached for her again, but she stepped back into the shadows. The room grew colder as the wind whispered through the window. Renard stumbled. He fell against the table. He wheezed. He begged her to return the cloth. His voice cracked with fear. She watched without blinking. His fear tightened his chest. His heartbeat raced wildly. He collapsed to the floor. His hands shook as he tried to crawl toward her. His breath became shallow. His eyes widened in terror. The cold air claimed him slowly. He whispered her name in desperation, but she remained still. His breath faded until it disappeared altogether. She stood over him and whispered that justice sometimes arrived quietly, like a cold wind. She placed the blue cloth beside him. She closed the window fully. She cleaned the bowl he had used earlier so nothing looked unusual. Then she returned to her sleeping mat. The next morning, workers found him cold and lifeless. The doctor said the sudden night chill must have triggered a failure in his weak heart. No one questioned Adele because she had been seen sleeping the entire night. And just like that, the fifth man fell to the silent storm that wore the face of a beautiful enslaved woman. 2 men remained, but the path ahead would be darker, more dangerous, and more unpredictable than anything she had faced before. The death of Master Renard spread across the island faster than the winds that swept over the sugarcane fields. People whispered about the unusual cold that night and how his weak heart finally failed him. Workers lowered their voices when they mentioned him, partly out of habit and partly out of fear that his spirit might still roam the estate. Everyone accepted the story of his death because it seemed believable. Everyone except Adele, who knew the truth better than anyone. She had taken the life of 5 powerful men, each cruel in his own way. Her footsteps were silent, and her hands left no marks behind. She moved from estate to estate like a traveler with no home, yet she carried a mission that guided each step she took. When Renard's property was divided, she was sold once again. She did not fear being moved. She expected it. The world had taught her that chains shifted, but never broke. She walked toward her next destination, with the same calm expression she had worn since the night her mother died. Inside her heart, the flame of purpose burned steady and strong. She felt no pride in her actions. She felt necessity. She felt duty. She felt a strange kind of peace that came from knowing she had delivered justice in the only way the world allowed her to deliver it. The next plantation was smaller than the others she had known, but its reputation was darker. It belonged to a man named Monsieur Vachel. People called him the Quiet Serpent because he rarely spoke, yet his silence held more danger than any shout. He punished without warning. He observed people like a hunter studying prey. He preferred breaking spirits rather than bones, because he believed a broken spirit created the perfect servant. When Adele arrived, the workers glanced at her with pity. They did not speak to her directly, but their eyes revealed everything she needed to know. Vachel was feared by all. She stood before him as he inspected the new arrivals. His face was expressionless, his eyes cold, his posture rigid. He moved slowly, as if each step was measured. When he reached Adele, he paused. His eyes softened for a moment, not with kindness, but with strange interest. He lifted her chin gently, and although his touch was light, she felt an unsettling disturbance beneath it, as if the softness hid something far more dangerous. He asked her name. She answered softly. He nodded and told the overseer that she would work inside the house. His voice was smooth and calm, but something inside her warned her that Vachel was more dangerous than the others she had faced. She learned her duties quickly. She cleaned the house. She brought water. She cooked simple dishes. She polished the wooden floors until they shone. All the while she studied Vachel. He spent mornings inspecting the fields from a distance. He rarely shouted. His overseers carried out his punishments, but he watched every moment carefully. Sometimes he smiled slightly when the workers cried out. His smile was small, like flicker of a candle before it dies, but it carried more cruelty than the loudest laughter. At night, he walked through the house silently. His footsteps were so soft that, sometimes, even the floorboards did not creak. Adele learned that he had a habit of checking every room before he slept. He inspected the windows. He touched each lock twice. He straightened any object that seemed out of place. He liked order. He liked control. He liked silence. One evening, he called her into his study. She entered with lowered eyes. He told her to sit. She obeyed. He asked her to read a letter aloud. She read it gently. When she finished, he asked where she learned to read. She explained that one of her former owners liked to show off by teaching one servant a few letters. Vachel stared at her for a long moment. He said her voice was pleasant. He said her presence calmed him. He dismissed her without another word. From that night on, he asked her to read to him every evening. As she read, he leaned back in his chair with his eyes half closed. He listened not to the meaning of the words, but to the rhythm of her voice. He grew comfortable around her. He began speaking about his childhood. He spoke about his ambitions. He spoke about his desire to expand his land. He spoke about the weakness of the workers. He spoke about his belief that silence was the highest form of power. Each word revealed his mind. Each sentence exposed his pride. Adele listened with quiet patience. She watched him carefully. He was smart. He was observant. He was cautious. She realized that killing him would require more skill than any man she had faced before. Vachel was a serpent, ready to strike if he sensed danger. She needed to become invisible, not because of her beauty, but because of her ability to disguise her intentions perfectly. For several weeks, she read to him every night. She watched the way he reacted to different tones in her voice. She noticed that he relaxed only when he felt completely in control. She noticed that he locked his room from the inside each night. She noticed that he slept lightly, waking at the faintest sound. She noticed that he drank a warm herbal drink every evening before bed, a drink he prepared himself because he trusted no one. She also noticed something else. He feared the sound of breaking glass. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but she caught it. One night, a servant dropped a glass cup in the hallway, by accident. The sound shattered the quiet air. Vachel froze. His eyes widened. His breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled slightly before he forced them to become still. He scolded the servant with a voice that remained soft, yet carried rage beneath the surface. That moment revealed a weakness. He feared sudden noises. He feared the unpredictable. He feared losing control. Adele held this knowledge close to her heart. She knew she could use it, but she needed more information. One day, she overheard two servants whispering about Vachel's past. They said that when he was a child, a violent accident had occurred in his home. A large mirror had fallen from the wall and shattered beside him. The noise terrified him so deeply that he never recovered from the fear. He hid this weakness from everyone, but those who had lived with him long enough knew that loud noises shook him to his core. Adele thought about this quietly. Each man she had killed had carried a weakness. Vachel's weakness was fear of losing control, a fear rooted in a childhood memory, a memory she could use as a weapon. She began positioning objects in subtle ways. A loose cup near the edge of a shelf, a book placed slightly off balance, a candle holder that stood too close to another object. She watched Vachel notice these things. He carefully adjusted each one back into perfect order. His control was obsessive. His need for silence was absolute. One evening, Vachel asked her to read again. She read slowly as he closed his eyes. Then she noticed something important. When he relaxed deeply, his breathing became slow and heavy. He became unaware of the world around him. She realized this might be the perfect state to strike, but striking him physically would fail. He would wake quickly. He would fight. She needed something that would attack his mind instead of his body. She needed something that would take advantage of his hidden fear. She waited for the perfect night. It came when the air outside was still, and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds. The house felt heavier than usual, as if the walls were holding their breath. Vachel called her into his room. He asked her to read. She read with a gentle voice. His eyes slowly closed. His breathing softened. She placed the book on the table. She walked quietly to the door and closed it. She checked each corner of the room. Then she moved toward the shelf where several glass items were placed. She lifted a glass cup gently. She held it between her fingers. She began tapping it lightly against the wooden frame of the shelf. The sound began soft, a tiny click, a faint echo. Vachel stirred in his sleep. She tapped again, louder this time. His breathing changed. She tapped a third time and allowed the cup to slip from her fingers. It fell to the floor and shattered into dozens of sharp pieces. Vachel woke with a startled gasp. His eyes widened in terror. He sat up suddenly, his breath heavy and broken. He looked around the room frantically. He saw the broken glass on the floor. His hands shook uncontrollably. His chest tightened as panic surged through him. He began whispering no over and over again. Adele stepped backward into the shadows. She watched him as he stumbled out of bed. He stepped on the broken glass, cutting his feet. He screamed softly in pain, but fear drowned his voice. He tried to reach the door, but he tripped over a fallen book and crashed into the floor. He tried to stand, but his body trembled too violently. His heart raced uncontrollably. His breaths came in short, desperate gasps. He clutched his chest. His legs buckled beneath him. The fear that lived inside him since childhood rose and swallowed him whole. He collapsed again, this time hitting the table beside his bed. The impact was hard. His body twitched. His breath grew faint. Adele stepped closer. She whispered softly that not every weapon was made of metal. She whispered that fear could break even the strongest serpent. His eyes looked at her briefly, filled with confusion and terror. Then the light in them faded completely. His body became still. Silence returned to the room. She cleaned the floor carefully. She gathered the broken pieces and placed them in a basket. She swept away the dust. She arranged the room exactly the way it appeared before. She left quietly before the first servant woke. When Vaishul's body was found, the doctor claimed his heart had stopped due to shock from a sudden fall. Everyone accepted this because the broken glass on the floor told a believable story. No one questioned Adele. She had been seen in the servant quarters throughout the night. This was her 6th kill. One more remained. And this last man would be the most dangerous of all, because he was the only one who suspected something in the shadows around him. He was the only one who listened to rumors with sharp attention. He was the only one who had heard stories of a beautiful woman who brought death with her smile. He would not be fooled easily. But Adele did not fear him. She had walked too far into the darkness to turn back now. She was ready for whatever waited in the final chapter of her silent revolution. After the death of Monsieur Vaishul, the island moved with an uneasy restlessness because too many powerful men had died in ways that seemed natural, yet carried a strange whisper beneath them. People spoke in quiet tones about sickness or fate or misfortune, but in the deepest corners of the island, a rumor had begun to grow. It was a rumor about a woman whose beauty could calm any room, a woman who moved with quiet steps, a woman who left no marks behind, yet carried death in her shadow. Most people did not believe the rumor, but one man did. His name was Monsieur Lefebvre, and he had heard pieces of the story from different estates. He heard about Belacroix, who died in his bed with no wounds. He heard about Renaud, whose heart failed without explanation. He heard about Garin, who collapsed after drinking his favorite mixture. He heard about Duval, who died in the dark. He heard about Renard, who froze to death in a warm room. He heard about Vaishul, who died beside broken glass. And each time the story reached him, someone whispered the same detail. A woman had served each of them shortly before their deaths. A quiet woman, a beautiful woman, a mysterious woman. Lefebvre did not believe in curses or spirits, but he believed in observation, and he believed in patterns. He studied the timeline. He studied the names. He studied the estates. Then he asked a simple question. Where did the woman go after each man died? When he learned she had been moved from one estate to another, following each death, he became suspicious. He told his overseers to watch for her. He told them to memorize her description, and when he learned she had been sold again and was on her way to his estate, He smiled to himself, because he believed he had finally found the key to the mysterious deaths. When Adele arrived, he stood waiting for her in the yard. He watched her calmly. She lowered her gaze as she always did. He walked around her slowly, studying her from every angle. She felt something different in his presence. His eyes did not hunger. His eyes did not admire. His eyes searched. He told the overseer to take her inside. His voice was calm, but carried hidden weight. Adele felt the shift immediately. She walked into the house, while her mind moved quickly. She understood instantly that Lefebvre was not like the others. He was suspicious. He was cautious. He was intelligent. And most importantly, he was observant enough to see danger where others saw beauty. She kept her expressions soft because she knew any change could expose her. She began working in the house. She cleaned the halls. She served food. She carried water. But she felt his eyes on her constantly. He watched her from windows. He watched her from doorways. He watched her when she thought he was not looking. He did not speak to her often. He simply watched. She understood that her usual methods would not work here. She could not lure him with softness. She could not rely on trust. She could not take him by surprise. She needed patience deeper than any she had used before. She waited. She observed. She studied him. Lefebvre followed a strict routine. He woke early every morning. He visited the fields. He returned by midday. He wrote in a journal each afternoon. He sat in the garden each evening. He slept lightly at night. Unlike the other men, he did not drink heavily. He did not invite women into his room. He did not behave carelessly. He behaved like a man waiting for something to happen. Adele noticed that he kept a small dagger hidden under his coat. She noticed that he locked his door from the inside and the outside. She noticed that he inspected windows carefully. She noticed that he always slept with a lamp burning beside him. He was prepared for danger, and she understood that killing him would be the most complicated task she had ever attempted, but necessity drove her. Justice drove her. Memory drove her. She could not stop now, not when she was so close to completing her path. For days, she silently waited. She listened to whispers from the workers. Some said Lefebvre had once survived an attack from a group of escaped workers. They said he killed 2 men with his bare hands. They said he did not fear death because he believed he was chosen to rule. But Adele saw something else in him. Beneath his calm exterior, there was a seed of fear. Not the fear of death, the fear of not understanding, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being outsmarted. She realized she did not need to break his body. She only needed to break his certainty. She began her strategy slowly. She moved objects in his study by small inches. She placed his journal slightly out of alignment with the table. She shifted a candle holder. She placed a quill in a different direction. She watched him enter the room and stop. She watched him look around slowly. She watched him adjust each item back into place. His face remained calm, but his fingers trembled slightly. The next day, she repeated the same thing. She moved objects in subtle patterns. She placed a book in the wrong corner. She tilted a picture frame just enough for him to notice it. He entered the room and paused again. He frowned. He checked the windows. He checked the door. He called the overseer to ask who entered his study. The overseer said no one had. This happened for several days. His frustration grew. His sleep became restless. His steps became heavier. He began to mutter to himself. He believed someone was watching him. The unknown disturbed him more than any physical threat could. Adele continued her silent game. She allowed him to see shadows that were not there. She positioned herself where he would catch a distant glimpse of her reflection in a window. Then she vanished quickly, as if she had never been there. He began questioning every sound in the house. Footsteps made him turn sharply. Wind made him stand still. The rustle of leaves outside made him clutch his dagger. She was weakening his certainty. Every day she planted small seeds of doubt. Every night those seeds grew into fear. One night he called her into his study. She entered with her usual calm expression. He asked if she had seen anyone moving his belongings. She said no with a soft voice. He stared at her carefully. His eyes scanned her face. For a moment, she thought he had figured out everything, but then he nodded slowly and dismissed her. When she left the room, she heard him lock the door and slide a chair against it. That night, he barely slept. She could hear him pacing the floor. His fear had become louder than his pride. The following night, she decided the time had come. She waited until the house was quiet. She waited until Lefebvre finally lay down, with his lamp burning beside him. She approached his door silently. She knew the door was locked. She knew he was inside gripping his dagger. She did not need to enter. She only needed to destroy his final layer of assurance. She placed her hand gently on the locked door and began knocking softly. Slow knocks, even knocks, calm knocks. Lefebvre sat up immediately. He asked who was there. She did not answer. She knocked again. He shouted. Still, she gave no reply. His breathing grew heavier. He stood behind the door, clutching his dagger. She knocked a third time. Then she stopped. Silence filled the hallway. Lefebvre panicked. He opened the door quickly, but saw nothing. She had already stepped into the shadows around the corner. He walked out, looking left and right. His lamp flickered. The wind blew gently. A sudden gust passed through the corridor, and the lamp went out. Darkness swallowed him. His dagger trembled in his hand. Adele took 2 quiet steps forward. Not enough for him to see her, but enough for him to feel her presence, like a breath behind him. He turned abruptly, slashing the air with his dagger. His foot slipped on the polished floor. He fell backward. His head struck the hard edge of the staircase. He gasped. He tried to rise, but his body was failing him. She remained still in the shadows. He whispered, "Who is there?" His voice shook. He whispered again. His voice cracked. He tried to crawl, but his strength left him. His breath grew shallow. His eyes widened, as if he had seen the invisible truth he had been searching for. Then the light faded from his eyes. His body became still. Adele whispered softly that justice had been delivered. The house remained silent. Not a single servant heard what happened. When morning came, Lefebvre was found at the foot of the stairs. The doctor said he must have walked in the dark and fallen. His death was ruled an accident. And with this, the 7th man fell, completing the chain of vengeance that Adele had carried across the island. She stood quietly as the workers whispered about the strange event. She did not speak. She did not smile. She did not reveal anything. She remained the silent beauty the world underestimated. But inside her heart, she felt a heavy release, as if the weight of many years finally lifted. She knew her journey was ending. She knew the island would no longer push her toward new monsters. She knew she had fulfilled the mission that had begun the night her mother cried out for mercy. She walked outside and looked at the horizon. The sun was rising slowly. Its light touched her skin gently. For the first time in many years, she allowed herself to feel something close to freedom. Not freedom of chains, because she was still bound by the world around her, but freedom of purpose. Freedom of knowing she had fought back in the only way she could. Freedom of knowing her story would live quietly in the whispers of those who feared the darkness inside unjust hearts. And so, the legend of Adele, the silent storm, the beautiful seductress, the shadow of justice, spread across Guadeloupe quietly. Some believed she was a spirit. Some believed she was a curse. Some believed she was only a rumor. But the truth lived only inside her, and she carried it with calm steps as she walked forward into the rest of her life. Thank you for watching Voices from Forgotten Souls. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel, because your support helps us continue bringing unknown stories from the forgotten corners of history. Please tell us in the comments where you are